Okay, so we are gonna get started, and obviously, as people enter the waiting room, I will let them in. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Foner, and I work in the Office of Alumni Relations at Northeastern. I work on our Affinity and Domestic Engagement team, which means I bring interesting and engaging programming to our wider Northeastern community. And we have a great event lined up for you all today. So just to begin, a couple housekeeping items. If you could please make sure that your microphone is on mute for the presentation, that would be greatly appreciated. I will be keeping an eye on the chat box. So if you are running into any issues or have any questions, please put your comments or questions directly into the chat box. You can message me directly or to the group as a whole. At the end of the presentation, there will be an opportunity for question and answer. Again, at that time, please put your questions into the chat box and I will read them out loud. One additional request, again, if your name on Zoom does not reflect the name you registered with or is unidentifiable, you can either message me with your name so I can check you in, or if you could update your name, that would be very appreciated so I can make sure you get any associated materials from the event after the event. So we are very lucky today to not only have a wonderful professor here to share his work, but also a former student of his who will be lending his voice and perspective to the presentation. Alex Bender is a 2020 graduate of the College of Engineering with a BS in Industrial Engineering and an MS in Engineering Management. He is currently based in Denver, Colorado, and working at the same company he did his third co-op with, Boom Supersonic. During his time at Northeastern, Alex studied abroad twice through the Dialogue of Civilizations program, first in the Netherlands with Professor Furth, and then second in South Korea. Ever since Alex's dialogue experience with Professor Furth in 2017, he has become an avid urban cyclist and a self-described sustainable urban transportation nerd. And now I am very excited to turn the floor over to Alex.
Well, thank you so much for the kind introduction, Stephanie. I'm really happy to be here to talk about my experience doing the dialogue, especially because it was seriously like one of my favorite Northeastern experiences. It happened back in 2017 and I still think about it every day. Both the like fun experiences of just being abroad as well as what we actually learned on the dialogue related to sustainable urban transportation. So I'm glad to be here today to just kind of talk about my student experience and answer any questions anyone has about the experience. But I think a good way to start it off is just showing a video that I actually made while I was on the trip. Just kind of explaining what happened every day. So let me navigate over to that video first, and then show that. 1 second, just have to pull it up. Okay. All right. And Stephanie, just confirming that you can see my screen. All right, cool. So here's the video.
This is me, Alex Bender, and I'm a third-year industrial engineering major at Northeastern. I had the opportunity to travel from Boston to the city of Delft in the Netherlands to do a dialogue of civilizations where we learned all about sustainable urban transportation at the Technical University of Delft. The trip was phenomenal and I learned so much about bicycling, trains, trams, buses, urban planning, infrastructure, and more. We were immersed in Dutch culture, we visited city governments, and we spent time in classrooms and on field trips. Here's my dialogue, 5 seconds a day.
Oh, sing us as stars.
So that video just kind of highlighted some of my experience. I made it back in 2017. So as you can see in the video, there's a lot of aspects to the trip. There's obviously a lot of bike riding. There's a lot of fun things as well that we get to do outside of dialogue. But then there's also all of the learning associated with the dialogue around sustainable urban transportation. Like in the video, you might have caught some of the infrastructure, like the different bicycle bridges that are stationary but also moving, and the different cycle tracks and trains and trams and buses and all sorts of things. So just kind of briefly to go through some more of my student experience. So obviously, as part of the dialogue, we got to travel a lot to The Hague and to Amsterdam. It was based in Delft, which is just this beautiful little city between The Hague and Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Also a city full of canals. So yeah, just seeing the Netherlands just by train and by bike was a phenomenal experience, and kind of showcased how you get to explore a new city on sustainable ways of transportation, which kind of helped me at least to feel more engaged rather than just doing a quick drive-through. I got to kind of bike on all these city streets all throughout the Netherlands. Also, just a lot of field trips were part of the dialogue. So you can see our whole dialogue group there on one of our bike rides in both the top left and top right. And then on the bottom, I just wanted to highlight some of the fun things we did as well, going to the beach, and then also the North Sea Jazz Festival in Rotterdam was something I went to during my dialogue. But just kind of getting into the meat of the dialogue. So as a student, the thing that I really loved about it, and still to this day, why I still reference it, why I think about it all the time, is how it was just a very engaging experience. We learned in a really engaging way. So here you can see us, we're at a city government office in the city of Delft, all learning from like the city planners there. So they'll tell us about like what they're trying to do to increase sustainable urban transportation, whether it's through public transport or building new cycle tracks, or what they try to do with pedestrian safety. And then we would go out and actually experience it. And that was kind of the like core of the dialogue, was we would learn about a concept in the classroom or at a city government with either Professor Furth or with a guest lecturer from the university or some organization, and then we'd go and experience it. So like here's a perfect example. We would learn about something like a cycle crossing, and then we would go out in the second part of the day and like actually get to bike on that type of infrastructure that we just learned about. Another example, like a certain type of bike path. And then also as part of the dialogue, after we kind of learned about these things, we were taking a lot of pictures and just kind of analyzing a lot of the different methods that the Dutch planners use to make cycling safe, to make pedestrians safe, to make driving safe and not congested. So in that way, it was extraordinarily engaging. And that's why I think I kind of credit that experience as being why I still remember so many concepts still 4 years later now. Here's just another example of something we would learn in the classroom and then go out and bike on and actually experience. This here is just some examples of the different infrastructure. Like you can see cycling is prioritized in the Netherlands. There's a cycle track basically on the side of every single road, and it's vertically separated from cars, so you just feel safe. You can travel anywhere by bike, and that was one of my favorite things about the trip, is just feeling like I could travel anywhere I wanted on my own 2 wheels, and not like being hampered by transportation as a constraint. So that's a reason I really want to go back to the Netherlands, just because I loved the country and the transportation. And then just quickly to go here. So the last part of the dialogue that was very engaging was, let me just pull these up quickly. We learned about all these concepts. We went and experienced them in the Netherlands, and then we did these projects thinking how we can use these Dutch concepts and transfer them back to the United States. So like, here's a project, for example, where my team and I looked at Center Street in West Roxbury in Boston. And we were thinking about how can we redesign Center Street using Dutch principles to be more safe for cyclists, for cars, for pedestrians. So I obviously don't want to scroll too fast or scroll through all of this, but this is just kind of showing like a redesign of an actual street in the US based on things that we learned about in the Netherlands. So that was the other piece that really stuck with me from the dialogue, was how we learned about these concepts, we went and experienced them, and then we thought about how we could apply them back in the US. So yeah, overall, that's kind of my student experience, how I learned so much. I had a lot of fun as well. And I also credit a lot of that to Professor Furth, who he's kind of the star of the show, and he'll kind of go in more detail about the actual topics that we learned about on the dialogue. So I'll take this moment now to introduce Professor Furth. So let me stop sharing my screen. So Professor Furth, aside from being my favorite professor at Northeastern, he's a professor of civil and environmental engineering, and he's a national expert in bicycle transportation, traffic signal control, and safe street design, with more than 30 years of experience in teaching, research, and consulting. Dr. Furth has lived, studied, and taught in the Netherlands, and has played an important role in introducing American planners and engineers to European best practices, including cycle tracks, protected intersections, advisory lanes, bicycle contraflow, speed control, and safe pedestrian crossings. So without further ado, Professor Furth, the floor is yours.
All right, fantastic. So I know in these times of pandemic, we all haven't been able to travel like we used to. So I thought I'd start with a couple of slides that show you, this is from my first trip ever to the Netherlands. As I looked out my window from the airplane, I had no idea Amsterdam was just full of canals. I knew Venice was a city of canals. I had no idea. You know, by the way, this right here, this is a river. This is the dam in the river, and the river came out here. Everything else was a canal. It's magical if you haven't been there. My second trip to the Netherlands, I went in March. And when I looked out my window, wow, this is what I saw. The tulip fields. The farmers here, they make their money selling tulip bulbs. So nobody cares that all the tulips blossom at once. You know, they plow under they just mow away the blooms, because nobody wants to buy that many blooms all at the same time. But while they're blooming, what a view. And I got to see that from an airplane in late March or so when they're blooming. Dutch people, they love to get on their bikes and go out for a ride in the bulb fields in North Holland, not too far from Haarlem and Amsterdam. Yeah, I see in the chat, oh yeah, one of my dialogue alums, Aliana is there. It's great to see you. And a couple of other alums, hi. So what I've done for today, for you all, is adapted a presentation that we're given by a friend of mine, Mark Wagenbeer, who is just the best ambassador of Dutch bicycling, explaining it to an international audience. So greetings to you from the Netherlands, from this young girl. And this video shows her on the first day when she's riding her bike to school. Just like every other Dutch kid. That's how they get to middle school. They ride their bike, and there's a proud father taking that video. But this is not just any girl, and he is not just any father. This is Her Royal Highness Catharina Amalia, the Crown Princess of the Netherlands, and her dad is the King of the Netherlands. By the way, my wife ran into him, not literally, on a bike path a few years ago. She was riding and he was riding with a couple of bodyguards in the city of Nijmegen. So we study urban transport and how to make it sustainable, because in a lot of countries, it's not really sustainable. It uses a tremendous amount of energy and is polluting the air with carbon dioxide. There's congestion, which has a lot of negative effects. So many injuries and deaths that come from road traffic. The air pollution, not just CO2, but the small particulates and the ozone precursors. The noise, and of course the obesity epidemic, because people, instead of getting around using their own power, are burning fuels. And urban traffic has consumed so much space that the places that could be beautiful with trees, benches, whatnot, no, it's just pavement, and ugly cars. But you know, the Netherlands is different, which is why I take students there on a dialogue. They have just about as much money as Americans do. They have money to buy all the cars they want, but they do only half as much driving as in the US. This is a congestion index. Amsterdam, nowhere near congested like these American cities. They have superior, excellent traffic safety. You see the red bars. Here's the Netherlands at around 3-point-something deaths per 100,000 on the road traffic. And here's the US, almost 4 times as bad. And by the way, the US and the Netherlands were exactly the same in 1972. So it's not that there's something so fundamentally different about them. They just cared and worked on it and got it a heck of a lot better. The US got it better too, but you see, they got it 4 times better than we did. They have relatively quiet streets. And the Dutch children are happy. They every year the survey comes out, says, oh, the Dutch children are the happiest. And I lived there with 4 children aged 4 to 14, and I can tell you, the kids are happy. And one of the reasons is they can go ride their bikes to playgrounds, they just ride around the neighborhood, anywhere they want to go when they get older, and so on. And in the Netherlands, it's the one country in Europe that is not becoming obese. And the streets in the Dutch cities, they're beautiful. The cities are really nice, especially the city centers where people like to go shopping. So it has a lot to do with urban planning, with public transportation, but especially with bicycling. And bicycling in Holland is something that everybody does. Families do it, old, young, middle-aged. Dutch people bicycle in the rain, they bicycle in the snow. Now, sometimes it gets so windy, they know it's time to get off. That doesn't happen very often, though. Most of the time, the weather is lovely, and people can enjoy a ride for recreation, for going to school, for going to work. You can ride in a suit, of course, if you have to. And many people ride for their work. So it's just such a natural thing for people to do because it's safe, because Dutch have made safe infrastructure in which bicyclists are physically separated from fast motor vehicle traffic. Now, people will think, oh, well, it's just, the Dutch they just are that way. And, my friend Mark put together these clips from the 1950s. And I like to show them because a lot of Americans think that whatever they see when they visit Europe, whatever they see, they think it's always been that way. And what I want to emphasize is how things have changed over time. Here in the 1950s, you see, oh yeah, everybody was riding bikes. This is a street. There's just hardly any cars. In Amsterdam at the time, bicycles outnumbered cars 20 to 1. This is just after World War II. People rode their bike for everything. Carpenters, how do you get there? You go bike. Chimney sweep, how do you get to your work? You go on a bike. Street, trash pickup, you do it with a bike. Window washer, you do it with a bike. So you could say, oh, well, I guess the Dutch people just always rode bikes. But actually, the two pictures are enormously different because of the challenges of affluence, that people could afford to buy cars, and what automobiles have done to cities as they became popular. Bicycling started declining and it was on its way to extinction as it essentially became extinct in many European cities that had a lot of people riding bikes in the 1930s and the early 50s. But the Dutch did something to turn that around, and that's the story that I want to tell. So the Dutch were late in becoming heavily motorized because they were actually in Europe, a relatively poor country. But once the car took off in the late 50s and early 60s, they widened their roads, they made more lanes, they got rid of some of the bike lanes. They said, we got to make room for cars. And they filled all the public squares with cars. Those public squares now are not filled with cars. Now they're back to being lovely squares and parks. There's a nice market event going on where there used to be a car park. So this was cycling in 1960s, early 1970s in Holland, and no surprise, bicycling is going down, down, down. And the urban planners of that period, to them, bicycling was something for a past of poverty. And it had no place in a future of educated, affluent people. And as they made their plans for cities, they said, we've got to adapt these cities to the future, which is the car. The city will never survive economically unless we widen these roads and add more roads. This is the city of Utrecht. And these were the plans that people were making to reshape Utrecht. By the way, the Utrecht's most famous building, the cathedral, called the Dome, D-O-M, is right here. And yeah, they don't want to knock down the cathedral, but they want to completely remake it into a modern city that can survive in these economically difficult times. And so they started doing that. They demolished buildings so they could widen the roads, build some new roads. It didn't only happen in Utrecht, it happened in cities all over the Netherlands. It happened in Delft. And here it is in Amsterdam. Just a huge swath of the old city demolished with plans to build a big highway coming right into the city. But then something happened. There were massive protests from residents saying, don't touch my home, neighborhoods saying, don't touch my neighborhood, from parents saying, don't touch my children and stop murdering the children, because the Netherlands still today has no system of school buses. Kids get to school mostly by bike, and kids were going places by bike, and more than 100 kids a year were dying. Big protests, and don't touch my freedom to ride. And so in the mid-1970s, the Netherlands changed its course. Instead of saying, we're going 100 all in with the automobile, they said, we're going with sustainable urban transportation, though it wasn't the term at the time. Here you see that gash that was made to clear space for the highway. And the red line shows where that gash is. This is what it looks like today. If I didn't show that red line, you probably wouldn't even know that anything had happened. The roofs are slightly different color, but otherwise they put the city back the way it had been. I like when we visit Amsterdam, we hear this story, and I like to take my students to visit the point that I call the inflection point. Where the highway was stopped. Here we are on this well, it's a very broad street in the sense you see how much distance there is between buildings. Nothing in old Amsterdam, pre-1900 Amsterdam, has any width like that. So this was stuff that was demolished. When they built it back, notice there is one, count them, one lane for cars. Bike path on the side, bike path on this side, nice wide sidewalks, bicycle parking for all the shoppers. And then as we come closer, then we get to the place where the protesters and the historic preservation people were successful in keeping everything from being demolished. And you just get back to this narrow road. If I turn around right here, there is an obelisk. That's a memorial to the protesters and the activists who stopped the highway project and stopped Amsterdam from demolishing so much to build its highways. This is the St. Antonius sluice gate, big nice canal, one of the very nice spot to have when this place is open, a very nice spot to sit at the water and have a beer and watch people in pleasure boats going through this sluice gate, which changes the water level. That's part of canal management. But I'll go back to we'll go back to sustainable transportation. Okay, let me just find where we were. Here's where we were. So here's some visuals of streets before and after. This is a busy street in Utrecht. Here's that same street today. No cars on it at all. Another Utrecht street. This street, I'll just pause for a second. This is one of those 4-lane roads that I showed you earlier, where they knocked down a whole bunch of buildings to widen the street. And now there are 2 lanes only for buses, and then bicycle paths and sidewalks. So instead of saying, yeah, we need to knock everything down to make more room for cars, they actually said we need more room for public transportation and bikes. Okay. Yeah, that's what it looked like before. And then in the late 1970s, they put away their plans for putting highways through their cities, and they started planning on a cycling network. This is some documents from the planning for Delft's cycling network. As part of that exercise, they identified about 125 different projects that had to be done, bridges that had to be built, new sections of cycle track that had to be built, and so on. And here is the Delft bicycling network today. And as Alex has told you, it's just marvelous. With dedicated cycling infrastructure. The Dutch attitude is separated where needed, and where is it needed? Wherever traffic is fast or heavy, and shared where possible. So bicyclists will share space with cars on quiet local streets where the cars are behaving in a way it's not stressful to ride with them, but otherwise separated. Not just quality bicycle paths, but quality bicycle parking. This is the parking garage built into the train station of the city of Houghton. You just park your bike, go up the stairs or escalator, and there's the train. Houghton, this is a northern section of Houghton, which has 25,000 people, and the bike parking there is for 3,000 bikes. In Delft, a city of 90-some thousand people, indoor bike parking at the Delft station. It was 7,500 bikes, not enough. It's being expanded to more than 9,000 bikes. In Utrecht, a city of 400,000, Central Station has just built enormous indoor parking garages underneath the station, 40,000 bikes. And by the way, those aren't just bikes for people who are riding from their home to get to the train. Sure, a lot are for that, but at least a third are people doing it in the opposite direction. People who live somewhere else, but they work in Utrecht, but their work is not right near Utrecht station. So when they arrive, they've got a bike waiting for them. They hop on the bike to take them the last mile to the hospital or the university or the office, wherever they work. If you ask, well, why don't they just take their bike with them on the train? There would be too many bikes on the train. There just isn't room for all of them. So instead, people have a second bike, which they leave parked overnight at a nice, safe station place near the train station. Here's my friend Mark Wagenbuer showing how easy it is to park your bike in double-decker parking. And with double-decker parking, by the way, you can fit about 20 bikes in the same space that you would fit one car. Cities in Holland, what you see is amazing, yet they're still continuing to improve things. Here you see how they upgraded the bicycling infrastructure on a street. It used to have, a bike lane, that's pretty nice, but they rebuilt the street and they created a lot more space on the sidewalk area, and they moved the bike path now to the sidewalk level, so the bikes are completely separate. When we're there, we also enjoy the wonderful car-free city centers. This is what it used to be, and then they experimented with, what if we close it down to cars? Will all the shops go out of business? It doesn't look like it. And so they decided to make it permanent. And in Delft, in The Hague, Amsterdam, cities all over the place, they've made these large car-free city centers. Sorry, I want to show you this amazing picture. If from up in the church tower, taking a look down on the beautiful market square and the old city hall. And this is Delft's big market square. When I lived in Holland in 1997, this market square was a parking lot. And here you see some of that. Because people thought that the stores won't survive. Tourism won't survive if people can't come in their cars. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You want to go to a place with cars, there's a zillion places you can go to. You want to go to a place that's magical, full of life, people walking around and enjoying themselves. People travel for a long distance to go to that, and the shops are doing very well. We visit the new suburb of Houghton. This is an amazing place. It built from nothing, following sustainable transportation principles. I'll just go back a second in this video. This is the main intersection in the city. One of the roads is a train track, which has the amazing bike parking right underneath it. The other is a bike path. No cars allowed. This is the main intersection of the north-south axis and the east-west axis of the town, because the town was designed so that for all the travel that people do within the town, they will do it in a sustainable way. This is what it looks like from the sky. And it was planned with 14 different compartments up here, and I think another dozen down here. And the compartments are made such that if you drive in with a car, you just have to drive back out. You can't get from one compartment to another except by going out to the ring road. So if you're starting, let's say, in this blue compartment, and you want to visit a friend over in this compartment, well, with a bike, you can go right through, but with a car, you'd have to go out to the ring road, go around. So there's, for cars, yep, there's a ring road. But for bikes, there's just an amazing network where you can go everywhere without ever having to fight with cars. And we see the same thing in the city of Delft. this is what Popsausaland looked like. This is a 1960s road when I lived there. 4 lanes with extra lanes for turning and so on, a wide expanse of asphalt. And my jaw nearly fell off when I came back to the country to visit a few years ago, and this is what I saw. They were under construction to reduce it to 1 lane per direction. And I'm a traffic engineer, so I could understand. Here's what they did. So that 1 lane can still carry all the traffic. And then they made much wider bike lanes and planted a lot more trees and made it a much more pleasant place for the people who live there. And that street, Popsausaland, is right here. And one of the keys to being able to reduce the number of lanes is replace signalized intersections with roundabouts. And here is a single lane roundabout with, it's kind of special because it's got a tram lane going right through the middle and a bus lane right here. But this intersection before had 17 lanes of cars coming in and out. And now it's just got 1 lane for cars going in and 1 lane going out on the 4 legs. So 4 plus 4, 8 lanes instead of 17. Wide bike path, riding around. We love to ride around that. Safe crossings for pedestrians because you're only crossing 1 lane at a time. And 1 year, my students actually got to stay in a dorm looking down on this amazing roundabout. So there are a lot more things that we study when we're over there. We study high quality public transportation. We study urban planning. We study suburbs. You know, Amsterdam and Old Delft, they're wonderful, but of course, nobody's building them again. Not in America, not in Europe either. So we study how the Dutch plan suburbs, where families with kids and people who have plenty of money and they own cars, but they want the nice suburban lifestyle, but they also want to be sustainable. And we see how they make it possible with that. And that gives us a lot of hope and gives us a lot of ideas for applying it here in the US. So let me stop there and welcome questions.
Okay, thank you so much for that very comprehensive presentation. Definitely learned a lot and hopefully gives us a little bit of hope for the future here in the United States. So we will get to as many questions as possible. I've seen a few coming through to me directly already. So I'm going to get us started on those, but please, anyone who has a question for either Alex or Professor Furth, please put it in the chat box and we will do our best to get to as many questions as possible. Okay, so one of the earlier questions in the chat box was regarding work being done here in Massachusetts in partnership with MassDOT. Professor Furth, can you talk a little bit about your relationship with MassDOT and the work that's being done a little closer to home?
Yeah, well, things are not as strong as we would like with the city or with the state, but you know, there's some things in there improving because America still has a lot of resistance. So one of the projects that Alex worked on that he showed you was a redesign of Center Street in West Roxbury. He worked on that as a student. I also, as his group, I also had some students who did a master's thesis. One student did a master's thesis. We really studied it in depth. We showed it to the city and they said, this is a great idea, but yeah, we can't afford to do anything like that now. A couple of years later, a pedestrian died crossing the street. And that pedestrian's son found out that, oh, well, one of Peter Furth's students has posted, here's a solution for how Center Street in West Roxbury, just like we learned from Holland, by the way, could carry all of its traffic with only 1 lane per direction and a place in the middle for pedestrians to wait while they cross. So crossing the street would be so safe instead of 4 lanes with long red lights and then cars racing to the next red light. So then the community got very engaged, and right now there's a process in which the city is hoping to apply exactly the design that we came up with. But they're facing resistance. A lot of residents of that community believe, as people do everywhere, that no, cars are the future. Taking away lanes is just wrong. You should never do it. So we'll see what happens.
We've had a couple little variations of this question observation. Here in Massachusetts and in the Northeast, the weather and the topography is quite different than you see in the Netherlands. Do you see that as a hindrance to progress here, especially in convincing people that biking or public transit is a valuable investment given the seasonality limitations?
Yeah, well, you know, in Holland, they have winter too, and bicycling goes down a little bit, goes down maybe 30%. And in Boston, bicycling doesn't go down that much in the winter, actually. You just save so much time, and it's so convenient. You just learn to put a light on your bike, get some good ski mitts. You know, people pay, I don't know, $100 for a ski pass. And they pay money to go out in the cold and race down mountains, and they don't complain because they dress. So the Dutch have a saying: "There's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing." If you dress for it, you can ride year round, like I've been doing for the last 30 or 40 years. We have hills, sure, but actually most of Boston is very flat. But now we got a solution to the hills, which is you can get an e-bike in which there's a motor on your bike with a rechargeable battery. And you can't just ride with that motor as if it was a moped. No, you have to pedal. But when you pedal to give yourself, you know, a certain force X, the motor adds its own, you know, X, and now you got a force 2X. And you just feel like Superman. And you can climb hills and go longer distances than you ever thought you could.
While President Biden's infrastructure plan was recently released, not sure if you have had a chance to see if there's anything of interest in there or anything worth getting excited about for the sustainable urban transportation folks.
It's hard to say. I'm sure it's going to be good because you know, Pete Buttigieg was his choice for Secretary of Transportation. You know, he could have chosen a railroad person, an airline person, a freight person. I mean, the last Secretary of Transportation, she was a freight person. So and instead, the president chose an urban, a city person. But ultimately, actually, a lot of the decisions are made at the state level. Our failure to emphasize sustainable transportation, mostly it's because we decided to put a lot of money into roads and not put a lot of money into public transportation at the state level, and it's more at the state level than at the local level. So I'm excited about it, but we need to educate the new generation of planners, of engineers, of politicians, which I'm working hard on doing and have been for a while. Not me alone, of course. And as they exert their influence, we'll see some great things. So there are some leading cities in the U.S. like Portland and Seattle are really doing some great things. The really great lead is coming from just north of the border in Vancouver, in Ottawa, in Montreal. Just amazing lead things that they're doing. And we'll all be following. It's just frustrating how slow it is.
If you had a top 3 wish list for changes you could bring to Boston or the greater Boston area for use of public transit, bikes, sustainable urban transportation, what would your top 3 wish list items be?
So the first thing would be is what I call road diets. A road diet is when you take a road and just reduce the number of lanes on it. Road diets have so many benefits. They make it so much safer to cross. You know, almost all of our pedestrian safety problem is people crossing multi-lane roads. And you remember you tell your kids look both ways. Your parents told you look both ways when you cross. It's so much easier when you just have to look one way There's one lane. If a car stops for you, 100% safe. You cross to an island in the middle of the road, then you look the other way, and the cars almost always stop. And if a car doesn't, well, you just wait, and then the next one will. And then it's 100% safe to cross. And because I'm a traffic engineer, I know that a lot of the multi-lane roads that we have in Boston can actually carry their traffic with one lane per direction. I gave the city a list of 14 of those roads. And so far, there have been a few conversions. Cummins Highway, Cambridge has showed the lead in cutting Mass Ave down to one lane per direction as it goes through MIT and Central Square. It's just amazing. So that's the first one. The second one is some real funding for the bike network. The city of Boston has what they call a bike network, a strategic bike fund, and it amounts to something like $4 or $5 per person per year. You know, so I've made the pitch, look, for $100, you can get a ticket to ride on all the wonderful slopes on a mountain skiing for a day. You know, how about, you know, maybe $20 per person so you can ride on all the wonderful bike paths on the city for a year, $20 a year. We spend more than $1,000 a year in transportation, and bicycling gets 5 or 6. So increasing that would make a lot of difference. And then you said a third thing. I'll stop with 2, Stephanie. There are a lot more things about. Well, okay. The third thing is actually housing. Housing, and because people who live way out on the fringe, yeah, all their destinations are so far away. It's hard for them to transport themselves anyway, except in a car. It's people who live closer to the center of the city, people who live in dense neighborhoods like Somerville, Jamaica Plain, where everything you need to get to is walking distance or short bike distance away. That's a much more sustainable lifestyle. So we need more housing in those kinds of places.
We have a somewhat technical question. Are the bike lanes paved with different materials than the road to make them safer, especially during weather?
So we found out that the best material for a bike is the same as the material for a car, bituminous asphalt, you know, what we call asphalt, bituminous concrete. It's red, but that's just a tint. They put a red tint into the very top layer because that red stuff is expensive. But the final layer of asphalt, they just put red into the mix so that everybody knows this is a bike lane. You're not allowed to park in it. You're not, you know, if you're a pedestrian, you don't step into it without looking. They've actually been the cheap way, the old Dutch cheap way for bike lanes was paving them with tiles, which then they were bumpy and so on. So no asphalt. So America, we actually don't have to worry about that. Asphalt's the way to go.
So this is a question for both Professor Furth and for Alex. If you had 3 to 5 days to spend, I don't know, pick your city of choice. I know that you visit a number of different cities. What are the must-see, can't-miss items, top restaurant or cafe that you have to make sure you go to when the borders open up again? Where are we going?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know about restaurants or cafe. Well, I'll tell you about the outdoor dining and drinking, actually, outdoor drinking places. So in the day you drink coffee, and in the afternoon and the evening you drink beer or whatever you like to drink. So, oh, come on, Alex, remember that gorgeous place? It's the old cattle market. So it's called the Basta Mart, from the Dutch word beest, meaning beast. And in Amsterdam, equally, probably even nicer, the Leidseplein. That's the beautiful trees and just such an ambiance, people walking around. And you know, in Europe, they don't chase you away from your table. You sit there and enjoy it a couple hours chatting with friends, You know, every now and then come along. Okay, well, you have something else? Yeah, and you have one of their delicious apple pies. And oh, just marvelous.
Yeah.
So
I was,
Leids applying in Amsterdam and Basta Mart in Delft.
I would second that. For me, the cities, so I loved kind of like exploring different cities and biking to them, but like just the whole city of Utrecht was just really cool. I just remember there were a lot of nice parks there, just great bicycle infrastructure. Everything was really close. There were canal. I don't know. That whole city just felt really, really nice. We went to, I think Houghton, what Professor Furth talked about, is just really fun to bike around because it's just so calm. Every street, every like passageway is a bicycle lane or a cycle track essentially. So I'd recommend checking that out. It's just a unique experience. And then just the things that are standing out are in Amsterdam, Vondel Park. That whole park. It's like Amsterdam Central Park. That whole park is just.
Yeah, you got to go to Amsterdam and rent a bike and go to Vondel Park and also go ride along the River Amstel. So there are central parts of Amsterdam that are just all full of tourists. I mean, but most tourists don't get a bike. So just get away from that really, really crowded area. I mean, by all means, go to the museums. But the outdoors, are just marvelous. And hey, I want to mention a museum that's really worth visiting if you go to Holland. So Anne Frank House is well known, and the lines are enormous. I mean, sometimes you're waiting 6-8 hours. But I take my students to another museum that recalls the experience of Jews during the Holocaust in the city of Haarlem, the Corrie ten Boom Museum. Corrie ten Boom's family was, her dad was a leading or well-respected Christian leader who felt a love for the Jewish people. And when the war started, well, they just started helping Jewish people. And next thing you know, they're a center for the underground. They're hiding Jewish people in their home. They're receiving, in addition to the few that they can fit, they have more than 100 who just come and they stay there for a night, and then they get them to a place in the countryside and so on. And we learned the story of that and see the secret hiding place that they built, where when they were raided, they actually, the hiding place worked. 5 people went into that hiding place, and the Germans, they sent their people there. They sent police to guard it, but people were able to escape. So that's a great story. The Corrie ten Boom Museum in Haarlem, and Haarlem is just a gorgeous city also.
Okay, I think that's all for us today. Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you so much, Professor Furth. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us on this afternoon. It was wonderful to have you with us. Be on the lookout for a survey. Be on the lookout for the event recording, most likely tomorrow. And hopefully we will see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Yes, and to my alum who have written and so on, thanks, and it's great to see you again. All the best.